Hi everyone, it's been a while since I did a video. I think the last video was on my Ford Territory, my daily driver. We did the rear suspension on that. Still haven't got around to doing the front. Just picked up a new set of tyres for it last week. So still got to do the caster rods on the front, and then I can send it off to the tyre place and get the tyres fitted and get the alignment done, and that's it. But until I sort of can get around to doing my own car, I've got to get rid of this one. This is my old man's car. Been sitting here probably for about 18 months. Had a whole heap of problems with it. He basically bought a new car in 2016, and this, what was once a nice car, became basically your supermarket, your supermarket run car to go get groceries. And he didn't really worry about dents and things that broke down. He didn't repair things as they broke, so we ended up with a lot of issues. The ABS module seized, had to go and get another one of those and install that, do all the brakes, breather pipe on the diff. God knows how long that had been torn in half, but I've replaced that now. Done a belt or two under the bonnet. Believed it had a crack in the head gasket. Now, a friend of mine who happened to be the president of the hot rod club I was in, my old man had taken the car to him, and he said yes, it's a head gasket. So we believed for a very, very long time it was a head gasket and just risked it. We believed it was it wasn't cracked where the water would get into the oil, so somehow it was getting down the cylinders but not getting past the rings, which was great. So I decided to put some of that additive in the engine to try and stop the leak, and I ended up putting 2 bottles in there and did what you're supposed to do. You get the car up to operating temperature, drive it round. You're supposed to come back and dump the water and flush it out, and then hopefully everything's sealed and you put coolant back in it. Well, I did that the other day, and I came back and the car was spluttering. So just like there was water getting into the cylinder. So yeah, you could probably have suspected it was a head gasket, but turns out it wasn't a head gasket. Or if it was, that sealant has sealed the crack. But I think somewhere along the line, and I don't know where, the old man had a faulty spark plug lead and he took it to a mechanic. Now, we only know 2 mechanics personally, so he's taken it to one of the 2. They've replaced the spark plug leads, or they've done a tune-up on the car or something, but not replaced the plugs. But I didn't know this, so because it was still spluttering out of the exhaust, I decided to take plug number 6 out and have a look at that, and it was all rusted up. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, water's got to be getting in there. So I take out number 5 plug, thinking that, okay, maybe there's also a crack in the gasket between the 2 cylinders. So 6's plug is a little rusty, maybe 5's plug is a little rusty. So I take that out, that's rusty. So then I thought, well, I'll just take the whole lot out. Every single plug was rusted. There was no spark, basically. I don't know how the car was running, to be honest. It looks like those plugs have been in there 25 years. So I was lucky I had the model after this, so I had an ED Falcon 6 that I sold to buy Territory quite a number of years ago, and I kept a used set in the garage. So I got those out and I cleaned them up, and because I'd always replace my plugs regardless. When it was tune-up time, the plugs got done. So unless they were those iridium ones that cost you a freaking fortune. But on these older cars they didn't require them, so plugs were fairly cheap, so I replaced them and kept a spare set. So I cleaned those up and I put those in, and to turn the car over, and it's purring like a kitten. There's no head gasket leak, there's no crack in the head gasket, but for literally the last 5 years we believe there has been. Now, I didn't have time to work on it prior to really now, and some work I probably did on it when I first bought it here 16 months ago or something like that. But I'd worked on all the ABS and all the other things, the brakes and everything else that needed doing on it, so I hadn't got around to that issue. So now that I got around to it, I discovered that it was only plugs all the time and never a head gasket, which is great. So today's project is transmission oil pan gasket. Been leaking a very long time, leaving a mess everywhere. I ordered a filter and a gasket kit way back when. So we're going to dump the oil today and put the new filter in and new gasket and seal that sucker up once and for all. As you can see, I've got the gasket sitting there in the sun, just to sort of get it into shape, because it's been bent up, folded up in a box for God knows how many years. We've got our filter there, got our oil there. Now, one thing that I had issues with was this car's extremely low, so trying to get it on a set of ramps, it's not great, because it hits the front spoiler. So all I did was I put a block of wood down, then a brick which steps up slightly a bit more, and then obviously put the ramp there, and as you gradually step up, the front bumper or spoiler clears the ramp and you don't catch on it. So yeah, that's a little trick you may or may not know, but now you know it. Again guys, like I said in the last vid, you know, make sure you put a chock under the back wheels, make sure it's in park, make sure the handbrake's on as well. I only have a normal oil change pan here, which is probably not going to catch a lot of the transmission fluid, because the transmission pan is actually a little bit bigger than this. So my approach to it will be, seeing the car's on a slope, we're going to undo the back bolts of the transmission first, and we're going to let the oil trickle out of the back of the transmission pan, and when that finally stops, we'll I will then undo the rest of the bolts and drop the pan. The socket you're going to need to undo the pan bolts on one of these E-series Falcons, or Fairmonts, or LTDs, or Fairlanes, is going to be a 10mm. So I've just got the 10mm there on the impact driver, and that's going to make light work at the job. Okay guys, as you can see, the fluid's starting to flow, so I've taken out all the back bolts. On the driver's side there's 2 side bolts, so they came out, and there's only 1 side bolt on the passenger side. It didn't start to leak, so what I did is I only just backed off this front left hand corner bolt, and I just started to back off the front center bolt, and then we started to get fluid starting to run. So if your gasket's been in a long time and hasn't been changed, it will seal up pretty good even with the bolts out. I didn't really get any leakage until I took tension off those front bolts. This one hasn't been, well, this whole transmission hasn't been serviced since the year 2000, so I'd say that gasket's going to be hard as a rock, but yeah, it's sealed to the pan pretty well in that time. So we're just going to let that drain for however long it takes till it stops, and then we'll come back to it. One of the things you can do, guys, just to sort of assist you or assist the pan in draining, and you've got to be gentle because you don't want to warp the pan. Just put a little bit of down pressure on it with your finger. I've already done it, so there's not going to be much fluid left to come out from what I'm showing you now. But when it first starts draining, just a little bit of down pressure on the corner, and you'll get a lot more flow. You'll get a lot of oil coming out much quicker. Always keep a couple of rags with you too, because you just never know if you're going to get any spillage. And try and put something under the car too, like a piece of cardboard, so if you do get anything missing the pan, your oil catchment pan, it's going to not drip on your concrete. So yeah, but as you can see there, I've now backed off the front bolts a little more, and we've got the pan hanging. So I'm going to still leave it a little bit longer because there's a lot of transmission fluid probably still clinging on to parts inside the tranny, and they will drain over the next half hour. So we'll just leave that there whilst we've got the pan lined up with the drain pan or drain bucket container. We'll just let it drip because we know we're getting it in. If I take it off, you know that transmission fluid could drip anywhere, especially from the front, because as I said, this type of pan is cut on an angle and it's not as long as the length of the pan. So doing it this way, you're draining all the oil towards the back of the pan, and it will basically go where you want it to go. Okay, we've got the pan off now. So this is what 23 years 23-year-old transmission oil looks like. So we've got a bit of muck in the bottom there, a bit of sludge. The magnets have done their job, so it doesn't feel real gritty. Obviously they are metal fragments because they wouldn't stick to the magnet otherwise, but it's reasonably good. The car's never had a hard life or been driven hard, so yeah, it's sort of lasted. I don't recommend leaving it that long, but you know, it is what it is. Now, as you can see, that new pan gasket is starting to straighten itself out with the heat of the sun. It's going to take a while, but we've got a lot of other work to do, so we've got to now clean all this up, scrape it all, degrease it, get it all clean all the magnets, and just get it looking pretty. Haven't removed the filter yet. I'm not going to do that quite yet, but yeah, we'll get back to that. Okay guys, one thing I'll normally do is take the magnets out of the bottom of the tray and or pan, and I'll usually clean those just with a rag, because you can actually pull the fragments off the magnets. Now if you try to degrease it and leave the magnets in, degreaser isn't a demagnetizer, so you're going to end up with bits of metal stuck to your magnets. But as you can see, it's nice and clean. That's the second one I've done. This is the third one. I'm just cleaning that up too. So yeah, you can pull the metal fragments off with a rag. It's much easier. And if you do it this way, you got less chance of losing your magnets should they become detached whilst you're degreasing your pan. Yeah, there's always two things I keep in my garage, whether I need them or not. One is Degreaser, the other one is black spray paint. We don't need to talk about the black spray paint today, but black is always handy for anything. But usually when the local auto shop has a sale, they'll do a deal, like five of these for $10. So it's always good to keep a couple of cans on hand in the garage. You just never know what you need them for or when you're going to need them. It's very handy stuff. So I'm just going to give you a look at the pan. I've already used one rag to get a majority of the stuff out, and I've had to discard that rag because it just was putrid. But this is just with a quick wipe down and just a little bit of a scrape along the edges. But I still will degrease it. I want to make sure it's nice and clean, so when the gasket goes on, we've got a good seal all the way around. Now the front part of your pan on the outside, you tend to get a lot of build up around the front, because if you've got any oil leaks from your motor, whether it have been from your rocker cover or rear main seal or whatever, it blows back and this is where it lands. So you end up with a lot of chunky stuff at the front. So don't forget to flip your pan over and scrape that clean before you're ready to degrease it. You can also use a wire brush to get in there as well, which helps, because there are some deeper spots in the pressing of the pan that you might not be able to scrape out. But yeah, just try a few different things. Okay, we got the pan nice and clean, and we'll dry it off with a cloth here. So looks good both sides. These E-series transmission pans are pretty heavy duty, so shouldn't have a lot of issues with it. So this old girl's been sitting in the sun now for a little while. I just got to get it round the right way, because remember I said there was 2 bolts on the driver's side and there was 1 bolt on the passenger side. Well, that's how you know where your gasket's at. So I'm just going to leave that sit there now for maybe another half hour. Just let the gasket settle into the pan, and then we'll be ready to install the gasket properly. I like to put just a very light skim of RTV silicone underneath the gasket. With cork gaskets, no you don't. If you're going to put anything on a cork gasket, you put a little bit of Vaseline on it. These rubber gaskets, now I've found that I've had major problems with head gaskets continuously leaking, and I've bought the good brand rubber gaskets. So here in Australia we've got the Specco brand, so I bought Specco before. No, it just leaks like a sieve. You've got to use a little bit of RTV on each surface, but I mean very sparingly, like you do with Vegemite on toast. You just got to go very, very sparingly. You don't want too much on there, because you still want the gasket to do its job, but that silicone is going to help with any imperfections in the gasket, and it's going to seal those little imperfections, which is where you normally get the leaks from. So yeah, we'll get back to that in a minute, guys. Don't forget to clean up your bolts as well, guys. If you've got a parts washer, that's great. If you don't, just find a little container and squirt some degreaser in there and job's done. Okay, one thing that you're gonna need to keep when you take your old filter off is this spring. So the way you put it on is basically you just slide it in there and the job's done. And then you clip those back into the retaining spots on the transmission housing. Okay, as you can see, the filter's back in. Now the wire on this side pretty much just slots into where it's supposed to. This side here, you've got to get it up over a little ridge there. I hope this is light enough for you to see. You've got to get it up over this little ridge here. So you might need to use a pair of long nose pliers just to pull it up and pop it in. It is a little difficult by hand, but once it's locked in there, it's in there for good. So that's our filter fitted. One thing I forgot to mention is when you take the old filter out, you will get a fairly decent discharge of oil that's higher up in the transmission. So be prepared that you will get this oil rushing down. If you've got a hoist and your car's on a hoist and you've got all the proper stuff, that shouldn't happen to you. But if you're working on the ground like this, and you're working on your back and you're trying to get the filter out, expect that your arm's going to get covered in oil once you pull that filter out of its tube that it locates in. There's two other really important things that I forgot to mention. One is, I guess, just for safety. Throughout the course of the job, if you're not using gloves like I'm not, and you've bought them but you're too stupid to use them, wash your hands every so often, because it's going to make your job a lot easier. Not going to be as slippery, and you just don't get all that debris and stuff back over your clean parts. The second most important thing is that when it's a nice day like it is today, make sure you hydrate. So, you know, we all need to keep hydrated, so don't overdo it, because like I said, you know, when it comes to safety, safety's important. And you know, I train people not to do this. And you know, you get too many of these into you, things can go wrong very quickly. So just yeah, just take it easy. Okay guys, when you've got the pan off and you've pulled your oil tray out, because eventually you've got to pull your oil tray out and dispose of it, you're still going to get drips from your transmission. So what you might want to do is, like I've just done, I've folded this piece of cardboard over that I had here, just to get rid of all the wet surface. So I've now got a dry surface to lie on again, and I've just put another rag under here. You can sort of still see it dripping from the back end, and it will continue to drip for a while. It could take you a little while once you've done that to clean up around the edge of your transmission housing, give that a good wipe down. So you need to do that, and then obviously you need to prep the tray and gasket. So you know, you don't want to end up with a big puddle of transmission fluid underneath the car whilst you're waiting to do, or whilst you are doing that. So yeah, just throw a couple of rags down there, and that'll just catch any extra oil that's going to leak out of the pan. I'm using a bit of this former gasket. You could probably use any silicone sealant, any RTV type based product to smear along there. It's basically to hold everything in place and take up any imperfections in the gasket. So you don't want to put a bead on, you just want to put a nice thin coat just along the edges here, on the high spots where this gasket's going to mount over the top. So there's a little ridge there, so you just want to smear along the ridge there and then stick your gasket down like that. And if you're using something like I'm using, this is a fast drying hard setting. I didn't actually buy this for this job, I bought this for something else on the car, but I have this, it's brand new, so I'm going to use it. So when I do get started on this, it's going to be a fairly brisk process, I'm going to try and get it done as quick as I can and get it under the car, and then get all the bolts on the pan nipped up. Don't have to be tensioned at that point in time, but you've got to get them fairly firm. So I'm just going to do the old one in the front, one in the back, come across, work in a star pattern, work across like that, get them all done up, and then once we've got them all done up, then we can go along and tension them one by one. So that's all the pan bolts. As you can see, they all come up really nice. I just swished them round in a small container with a bit of degreaser, and then dried them off with the rag, and they're clean enough. Okay guys, I've got the pan here. It's all clean. Now it's clean. So we've just opened up the silicone. Just going to put a little bit of this around here. It actually reminds me, and it smells like another product I used to use. I believe it was a Permatech product. Used to come in a little bottle with a brush. You could get it in a non-hardening and a hardening solution. The name's just eluded me at the moment, but yeah, it smells exactly the same. It's almost as if Permatech's done away with that little bottle. I haven't bought any for a very, very, very long time, so I have no idea if it's still around or whether they've actually now put it in a tube. But anyone that's done any type of sealant, put any type of sealant on an engine will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it even looks the same. It's even a brown colour, so it's not black. It's a brown colour. So just a really thin bead on there, guys. Nothing too much. So I've got the gasket right beside us. I got a clean rag out. I wiped the gasket down, make sure there was no debris sort of stuck in the folds here. So now I'm going to lay this on top. Lay it on that ridge. That's just going to help hold it in position. It's like I said, it's not to stick it down, but it's to hold it in position for me. So when I do push it up against the transmission, we're going to get everything pretty well lined up. So try and line up your gasket up as well as you can with your bolt holes here, because it'll just make it easier when you push your bolts in. And that's about it. Now I don't think I need anything on the top of it, but there you go. It's stuck to the pan. So let's get started and we'll get these bolts in. Okay guys, I've used the impact gun or impact driver to just nip the bolts up, but you get a lot more feel for the tension when you use a ratchet. So I'm just going to go around this and just nip it up. Okay guys, I've just tightened up all the bolts with this little 1/4 inch ratchet. You sort of get a good feel for it. You sort of, if you've done a lot of cars and a lot of repairs in the past, you sort of know when that bolt reached its tight spot, I guess, without exceeding its you know, over tightening it to the point where you crush the gasket. So I've nipped that up and I'm pretty confident with that. But if you're doing it for the first time, just jump online, just Google it, torque settings for transmission oil pan, and you'll find the torque settings. If you've got a torque gun, that'll be great. If you haven't, well, you can do it this way. So Yeah, all's good. Sort of just getting off subject a little bit, but it's sort of one of the things you can do whilst you're under the car. As you can see here on my engine, there's been a few leaks over the years, and earlier in the video I was saying that I'd used the rubberized gaskets on a head gasket. I actually meant to say rocker cover gasket, not head gasket, so correction for that. But all the oil that's leaked down over the years from that rocker cover gasket has just accumulated here on this dust cover plate and a little bit on the sump there. So I'm just going to get a scraper. I'm going to lay another old towel or rag down here, and I'm just going to scrape this stuff off, because whilst ever you got this stuff accumulated on the engine tends to hold more heat than it would as if, you know, than if it was clean. So if you get the opportunity to give your undercarriage a little bit of a wipe down here in your engine bay, do it. Okay, it's going to take you an extra 10 minutes. Like, you're already covered in oil and you've already got lots of greasy rags around, so just grab a metal scraper and yeah, give it a scrape down, clean it up a little bit. Okay, as I mentioned a bit earlier in the video, when I was cleaning up the transmission pan, I had to dispose of a rag. I disposed of it, but I kept it handy. So now, with scraping all the cross members in that engine bay area, I've caught a lot of this this thick oil buildup, and I've used that rag I just disposed of to catch it all. So now I can just put that straight in the bin, and I'm left with no mess. Okay, my next step now is going to roll the car down the ramps. So I want to remove that chock from the back wheel. So I'll just put that up here for now. And I'll set this up, and hopefully you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about with the ramps and the lowered car. Okay, so as you can see here, the spoiler still hasn't hit the ramps. We're just about to go up onto the tyre, but I don't want to start the car up with no transmission fluid in it. So we can leave the car on the ramps at this stage. It's in park, it's got the handbrake on it, and it's basically got that brick there as a wheel chock. So let's put some fluid in the transmission. Okay, on these EB models and the model that followed after ED, lucky enough to still have a filler tube on them from the EF and EL. I believe they removed the filler tube. The only time the transmission got topped up was when it went in for a service. So you're going to need to find a funnel, something that's going to fit fairly well. This doesn't quite go into the tube, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a piece of sandpaper or a bit of emery paper and just rub around the edge of it just to thin it out a little bit, just so I get a good seal, and we'll see how we go. Okay, you're probably wondering how I know how much transmission fluid to put into the transmission again. Well, I'm looking at what I've drained from the transmission, and that's probably about 3 litres. Now there's going to be a little bit of oil that obviously we lost, that's spilt onto the cardboard, and there'll be some that's trapped in the filter here. So we're going to start with 3 litres, which will be enough for us to be able to start the car and warm the transmission up, because you're supposed to check the transmission fluid when the transmission's hot, so we can make any additional top-ups once the transmission gets hot. So we're going to go with 3 litres. One thing I've also done is put tied a rag around the filler tube, just in case we get a little bit of spillage. Then that way, you know, the rag's going to catch it. Okay guys, I've gone with 3 litres, so we're down to the remaining litre. So we'll just give that some time to settle into the transmission. So not long, just a couple of minutes, 5 minutes if that. As you can see, I've got no spillage. Couple of drips there when I took the funnel out, but no mess, which is good. You don't want to drip that stuff on your catalytic converter or your exhaust, because it'll stink. And I did put the cardboard back under just in case I had any leaks from the pan, or should I have spilt anything during the topping up. But at the moment it's looking good. That pan should be full of oil now. It should be over the gasket, the level of the gasket, so if there's any drips, I'm going to notice it, but nothing so far. Now I've got the engine running just so we can warm up the transmission and check the oil. We've got to get that transmission fluid hot, so we just leave that sitting here for a couple of minutes, just ticking over. But engine's running absolutely beautifully. Used to run with a pop 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 out of the exhaust. It's quiet as anything now. So all it was plugs. It wasn't a head gasket. So yeah, it's a good thing I just got inquisitive and took those plugs out to have a look. But yeah, not bad for a car that was built in 1993, and it's running on LPG as well, and that's, you know, that's running pretty bloody smooth. So you know, all the hard work's paid off. Okay, car's been running for a few minutes now, so gonna get it up off those bricks, off those ramps. So keep watching, guys. And that's the way we do that. So let's have a quick look under the car whilst we got it on clean concrete, because if it's leaking, it's going to piss out all over my concrete and I will not be a happy man. But at the moment it looks like everything is sealed up. There's no drips. Only time will tell though, so we'll check her again in another, I don't know, whatever, half an hour. I'll I'll start her back up now and I'll check the fluid, make sure our levels are right, and we'll see where we go from there. So yeah, we'll check back in half an hour. Okay, we have success. So no leaks as yet, but I will keep an eye on it over the next couple of days. And yeah, she's back behind the gates. So I've got one more job to do on it, and then it can go back to my old man's place and I'll be able to get my cars out finally. So hope you got something out of that today. I know it didn't go in depth, but it's not really a difficult job. As I always say, guys, be safe, be careful,